Good evening, everyone. Another beautiful sunny evening here in North Scotland, and I'm out and about with Will, the youngest, and the two dogs tonight. So if you hear a little bit of commotion, that's exactly what that is. But I wanted to take a few minutes today to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, inflation, and the impact on that in the broader economy. And I want to do that because I think it's really important for people to understand some of the broader macroeconomic context at the moment and the impact that that's going to have on all of us. So it won't be news to many people now to know that organisations like Apple, Microsoft and others are raising a lot of prices with respect to hardware and software. And I think we're broadly going to see that trend continue in and amongst the companies that haven't already done that. But the question, of course, is why? And I think in reality, it actually comes down to a little bit of supply and demand. So in general, of course, artificial intelligence is this thing that is going to massively revolutionise how we work, how businesses operate, how people do their day-to-day lives. And as a consequence of that, there's going to be large efficiency savings. We're going to be able to do more. We're going to be able to do it faster. We're going to be able to do it cheaper. And all this other stuff, which is fantastic, and that's exactly the direction that we want to be heading in. And I completely recognise that there will be disruption to the broader job market, but actually I see it as a net positive for society as a whole. But of course, to do that thing, you've got to have an infrastructure that sits behind it, that runs everything, and that's very much where we're seeing a lot of these issues today, or in the present times. And we're seeing that because the commodity that is causing these issues is something called compute. And compute is essentially my collective term, and different people use this differently for the internet, the power, the software, all the stuff that goes into the hardware, data centres, computers, phones, and so on, to make things like the internet and artificial intelligence run in the way that we need them to. And that is the area of the economy at the moment that is seeing quite a lot of strain. The analogy I give when I'm having this conversation with people is, where we are today with respect to artificial intelligence, we're entering kind of a new industrial era, really, or certainly that's what I think we're doing. And I compare our times now to the times of the Industrial Revolution back in the 1800s. Now, that was a time where we went from very manual farming practices or manual trade practices to much more machine-driven production mechanisms, basically. And one of the things that we invented during the Industrial Revolution was this thing called the railroad, and that's clearly a concept that's very familiar to everybody today. But it wasn't then. And when the time came that it got popular, people thought, hey, hang on, we're onto something here. This is really good. It means that we can move things faster, we can do more stuff, etc., etc., etc. We want to invest in the railroad. And the people that did that early on, quite likely got incredibly wealthy, made a lot of money, built railroads, put trains on them, and all that other good stuff. But then there comes a point where the infrastructure that is required to facilitate the railroad as an entity becomes increasingly scarce, because the rate of demand just takes off, goes vertical, and completely outstrips the amount of supply that is just available. And by that, what I mean, I'm talking about the steel, the infrastructure and the industrial mechanisms by which it's built, the physical labour and expertise that comes to the building of the tracks, the civil engineering that builds the bridges, all that other kind of stuff. There's only a finite amount. And when that translates into today's economic context, I think we're at kind of a very similar point with respect to artificial intelligence and the infrastructure rollout that comes with it. So, going back to people like Microsoft and Apple putting up their prices, yeah, of course they're putting up their prices, because we're now reaching a point in that exponential growth of things like artificial intelligence whereby the infrastructure that underpins this output, this amazing world-changing thing, is now kind of at the limits of what it can do within the current structures that exist. So until we get to a phase where the physical infrastructure is in place, data centres and everything else that you need to build and deliver computing power, underwritten by very cheap electricity and water systems, because it takes a lot of power and a lot of water to run these centres, we're going to see prices probably continue to rise. Now, again, this is world according to Nathan, but I would like to think that that is a short to medium term thing, because longer term we're going to find ways to overcome these problems. Maybe renewables is part of that. I don't know. Maybe we go nuclear. Maybe it's a combination of lots of different things. But essentially, the market will demand, just going through a few low trees, the market will demand that we find a way to deliver cheap power to underwrite the artificial intelligence infrastructure. And eventually the way free market economics works is that we'll eventually find it. But in the shorter term, guys, I think this is only really the beginning of these price increases and that inflationary pressure. Now, of course, if you listen to people like Elon and Sam Altman and all the others, they will tell you that artificial intelligence is the beginning of the age of abundance, and it's going to mean that we don't need to go to work. We're going to need things like universal basic income and all that other stuff. Maybe you subscribe to that, maybe you don't. I don't really know how I feel, if I'm honest with you, with respect to that particular position, other than recognising that if that is going to be a thing, it's probably a really long way away. And so in the meantime, we're kind of like the early pioneers of this technology, and we've got to ride it out, the rough with the smooth. Do I think artificial intelligence will have a long-term deflationary impact? Absolutely. But is that going to come with short-term bumps in the road while we build this vast infrastructure, the likes of which we've just never seen and encountered before? Yeah, probably. So look, a bit of context is everything. I wouldn't throw baby out with bathwater. I don't think this is the beginning of the end for these massive tech companies. I think this is just them responding to real-time, large-scale infrastructure pressures, the likes of which we're just not used to encountering. But the long-term trend still looks really good, right? Hope you found that useful. That's my take on it. Really interested to hear yours. Leave me a comment, make a point of reading all of them, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. I don't know where you are, but it's absolutely fantastic here. A couple of dogs there, if you can see them kicking around, causing chaos. There's one. There's the big lad. Have a great weekend and take care wherever you are.